Welcome back to Decision Analysis and Forecasting for Agricultural Development. We're really excited to deliver this portion of the content to you because we think it's really central to decision analysis. So this whole thing is going to be about making decisions. That is to say, making quality decision making, or good decision making. We're going to follow the work of Howard and Abbas and hopefully bring this idea across of how it is that we frame and make quality decisions. So a decision, just in the simplest of terms, according to Howard and Abbas, is a choice between two or more alternatives, that is, different types of options, that involves an irrevocable allocation of resources. That is to say, I can't travel back in time to make my decision again or to unmake my decision. We travel through time in forward fashion, and with decision making similarly, we can't go back and make our decisions a second time. Decisions can fall on a spectrum of quality, the quality of the decision itself, so it can go from a good decision to a bad decision, and it can fall on a spectrum of quality of the outcome. That is to say, I can have a bad outcome or a good outcome. And I can have a good decision and a good outcome if, for example, now at the time of pandemic, I choose to get a vaccine and I and my loved ones, I didn't get anybody sick, I didn't get sick myself, everyone's well. I can have a good decision and a bad outcome if, for example, I choose to get a vaccine and I have some kind of a side effect from that. I can have a bad decision with a good outcome. That is to say, I choose not to get a vaccine, even though it's possible, it's available. But nevertheless, I and my loved ones are well, nobody gets infected. And I can have a bad decision and a bad outcome. That is to say, I can choose not to get a vaccine, and I and my loved ones or my loved ones are sick with the virus. So that's really the simplified spectra of decision-making options. And we should always try, since we're in the business of supporting decisions and decision making, we should always try to choose a good decision. Since we really can't know the outcome, we should choose a decision that it falls in the spectrum of good, regardless of how the outcome works. So we should try to choose the best decision option. What often happens is that instead of thinking about decision outcomes in terms of how well the decision was formulated and made, we rather think about the outcome and think back that the decision might have been different based on the outcome. So the most fundamental distinction in decision making is between the quality of the decision and the quality of the outcome. That is to say that good outcomes and good outcomes in the case of either good decisions or bad decisions doesn't mean that they're both good, right? A poor choice with a good outcome doesn't suddenly become a good choice in retrospect. It was still a bad choice. Even if you win the bet, you probably shouldn't have bet your entire savings on some very off chance that you would win, for example. And what people might think is like, oh, I chose well in not taking the vaccine since nobody got sick and I didn't get sick. But instead it was a bad decision, just happened to have a good outcome. So we should always try to make a good decision. Likewise, just because a bad outcome occurs, it doesn't mean that the decision was faulty. You could say, people might say, well, we got sick anyway, so we shouldn't have taken it. Or, yeah, I lost my house anyway, so I probably should have just bet it at that poker game in the first place because it burned down later. So really, we shouldn't have any regrets if a good decision results in a bad outcome. The outcome is out of our control, right? It's the chaos of much of it is due to the chaos of the universe, probably 99.99%, who knows, of some decisions. We should focus our energy instead on making sure that it's the best decision that we can make. Yeah. So what we have some criteria really to make this possible. We have some main criteria to support decision-making and to make sure we're in a condition where we are able to work with decision analysis and in decision theory. We need, of course, a decision maker. That is someone to make choices, someone to choose between options, someone with the power and the interest and the overall just who's able to make choices. We need clear decision choice with alternatives from which to choose. That is option A, B, C, or do this or do nothing. We need some kind of alternatives. There need to be some kind of preferences about the consequences or the outcomes of the decision. So these can be personal, these can be societal, they can be cultural values, perhaps as simple as farm income, right? How much money does the farmer make? Or something much more broad, like the ecological or climate effects or cultural, some kind of societal or cultural effects of the decision. We need some kind of information. That is, we need to generate or access some kind of a causal understanding of how this decision impact pathway will function. And this can come from farmers, can come from stakeholders, even political decision makers, nutritionists. We can get all kinds of people in there depending on the decision to help us understand causally how the whole thing works, but we need some kind of information. Howard and Abbas also framed this as a chain. So that's another helpful formulation of this decision impact or decision-making process. The chain in this analogy is only as strong as the weakest link. That is to say, to achieve decision quality, we must ensure the quality of each link. So the first, if I can start randomly somewhere here, is about values and consequences of outcomes. So, right, what kinds of consequences do I care about? What kind of values do I have or do we have as a community? Or which values am I working toward? Is it just income? Is it ecological? Does it have to do with gender implications? It can be very broad. Mostly we work with decisions that are related somehow to the Sustainable Development Goals and the SDGs and thinking about a sustainable future. And that, of course, is quite dynamic, lots of different interactions to consider. So if we have the right values, then, or at least if we've determined what our values are in the decision, then we can move on to the right information. What do I need to know? Who do I need to talk to? How do I get information? Do I understand everything about how this whole thing works? Do I have a clear causal understanding of the functioning of this interaction? We need some kind of clear reasoning about the decision. So that's why it's important to work with groups, work with lots of experts and get lots of feedback on how the whole thing functions. We need a very clear frame. Well, of course, we need the decision maker, right? Well, is it someone who's going to take action? Are they really going to take action? Are they asking us instead to paint the bullseye after they've already shot the target or to prove that what they've done is correct? That's not the kind of thing we're interested in working on. We're interested in working on things where people need to take action and they have uncertainty. The frame, we need a clear decision choice. We talked about that earlier. Different options from which to choose is another important piece. So yeah, make sure we have all of those parts in order and we can begin to apply some kind of decision support for those decision-making processes. So now within your groups, please start to think about these ideas and write them down now, even as a first draft. If you don't have a clear decision or a group yet, then you may start to think about that. This experiential part of our course is really based on interactions as groups. So try to find a group that you can work with or contact us if you need some support in that process. What you want to do, if you don't have a group or anything like that yet, then something hypothetical here is fine for now, but it would be useful if you were working already with your teams. I want you to define a decision maker make the choices. So just tell us who that is. It's a sketch now, it's just a draft, but try to write it down. Who are these decision makers? Or who is this decision maker? Define the decision choice and the alternatives from which this decision maker should choose, right? Should they change hiring practices? Will it reflect somehow on the gender diversity of the farm employees? Or should they invest in a new type of crop, and will it affect somehow the productivity of the farm? What's the reason? What's the decision choice and the alternatives from which to choose? Do they have 17 different crops to choose from? Do they have, does a policymaker have 3 different policy options to implement? Try to define that choice. Define the preferences that are the values, really, the cultural values or the personal values, the preferences about the consequences or the outcomes of this decision. Again, these can be personal, societal. Is it something broad like ecology and climate, or is it something rather narrow like yield or income? And try and define, if you can, sources of information for this causal understanding. Is it foresters? Is it farmers, women health experts? Are you going to do a literature review? All of these things are recommended. You should get as many sources as possible for your information. And information, again, here is this causal understanding. But try to jot some things down. Write down your ideas about this. Where are you going to get this information? So share that with us in the Slack, and we look forward to seeing what you come up with. Good luck.